All right. I think now what we'll do is because of timing, we're going to go ahead and move into cuts and look at some cut classes here. But notice that these cuts have the 12th rib cross section, and that's why they're called quality cuts because they have that 12th rib cross section. So notice the ribeye on both sides. So here we have the wholesale rib. The other side is called the blade face. It has a loin eye in it as well. You'll notice this little bitty muscle says ribeye. That's the ribeye. You look up here, that's the ribeye. You come over here, they call these loin eyes because this is a loin. And so you'll see the loin eye here, the loin eye here. Actually, a little piece of the loin eye in the short loin is down here. So when you look at that, where do we looking? Only place you can grade a carcass for USDA grade is at this 12th rib cross section. It's the only place. And so because it's the only place, we're going to use that cross section for determining the quality grade of the cut, just like we would those carcasses. So keep that in mind. All right, so let's talk about cuts as a whole, these quality cuts, quality factors, same thing. You're going to see the same things written here for these cuts classes, just like we did the carcasses. Same rules, okay, where prime is king, okay, top choice is next king, select and low choice is kind of the average, is kind of what we look at as the par. Selects only if they're yield grade 5 or higher, yield grade 2 versus 4. We're going to talk about, well, we don't know the weights. Well, we assume that all the cuts weigh the same. We don't know the kidney fat, that's for sure, but we do have a couple of factors that are in the yield grade that we'll see in each one of these cuts. And that is the fat thickness in the ribeye, and then standards almost always. And the reason I put almost is because you never know. There may be something that I'm not thinking about, but in reality, standards usually go to the bottom. So I said we're going to do quality grade just like we have. Okay, yield grade, we don't have a full carcass, but we do have the factors. So first of all, if we look at this rib over here, here's the backbone. From the bottom of the rib eye to the top, 3/4 of the way, we take a fat measurement at that location. That's the 12th rib fat, just like we see right here over in this drawing. Bottom of the rib eye, backbone side to the top, 3/4 of the way, taking measurement. It doesn't really, bottom top doesn't really work as well when they're laying down like this, but you get the idea. So you go from the bottom of the ribeye to the top, 3/4 of the way, take a measurement at that point, and that's where you're going to determine the PYG, preliminary yield grade of that carcass. And remember, this scale is kind of important to remember. If it has no fat at all, it starts out at a 2. If it gets to a yield grade 3, it has 4/10. And notice every 4/10 increase, okay, it's increases 1 full yield grade. So 8/10. That's kind of an important number because now we're starting to get into that yield grade 4. And so knowing whether that carcass has 8/10 or not might be important as we determine whether it's an excessively fat carcass or not, because we want it to be in the yield grade 4 category. Now, the other factor, remember, we still have that's part of the yield grade is ribeye. We don't really care what the weight is. If one, and we assume that all the cuts weigh the same. So if it has a bigger ribeye, that's going to make that yield grade better. It's going to actually make it a lower number. Remember, lower numbers are the best, higher numbers are the worst. Yield grade 1's the best, 5's the worst. And so we have those two factors still to help us. When we look at quality from a question standpoint, marbling is important. We also look at that bright cherry red, bright youthful color. Uniformity of color is important. We also look at firmness and texture of the meat as well. So those are just things for questions. Marbling, again, is the most important factor in this. So let's look at beef ribs. Okay, so once we determine the quality grade, we're going to look at trimness, not just all over the, over the ribeye, but we want to look at the fatness over the entire cut. We do have this other face, which really helps us because it's kind of a window. If we look at both ends and they're fatter at both ends, generally it's going to be fatter throughout the cut. And the other thing that's really important that we'll ask questions about, but also an important placing point, is this seam fat. That's the fat between the muscles. So seam fat in this particular cut is really important to consider. We call this the blade face. This is the rib face. And what's between is the back and lower ribs and lower blade. in that area. Lower blade because it's below the scapula or the blade bone. So muscling, we look at the area, the size of the two ribeyes. That's the most important muscle in both cuts. That's important on both sides. We also look at the turn to the top. Notice this is a round muscle. So the more turn to the top that we have as we go from this point to this point, the rounder that muscle is. Generally, that's an indicator of fat. If it's really flat through there, that's an indication of fat and being lighter muscle. Okay, ribs, short loin, same way. Okay, so same thing. We have two faces. We have the loin-eye face and we have the sirloin face. Okay, so loin-eye face, sirloin face. Okay, if we take a look at that, this is called a short loin. These cuts out of here would be a strip loin would come out of this end of it. The other end would be the porterhouse T-bone steaks. And Dr. Griffin will get more into that. So we look at, again, the fat over the eye. That's really important. We start there to look at the size of the ribeye muscle to get that yield grade. Other places to look at fat. Okay, we have two faces now. Again, remember, so again, both faces, we look at both sides from one side to the other, and we see the amount of fat. Generally, the fatter they are on both sides, both faces, the fatter they are between, not always. We also have one other really neat area to look at fat, and that's along this flank edge. Okay, that's where the flank has been taken off, and so we can look at the amount of fat at that location. And the last place that's really important because it varies is this kidney fat, also called channel fat. That's this fat around the tenderloin on the sirloin face side. So those are important criteria to look at. Muscling, we're going to look at the size of the muscle in the ribeye, loin eye. We call this the loin eye. Another really important muscle is the tenderloin because that's the most important muscle, is how big that tenderloin is. That's an important criteria. And so we want to make sure we keep that. And then we also look again to that turn to the top. These cattle tend to put a lot of fat over this loin edge, flank edge. And so if it's really flat there, that's an indication of fat and light muscle. If it has a nice turn to that, that tells us it has fairly good muscling. All right, full loin, same thing, except we have a different face on the other end. Same points, we have a different face. We're further back. This is where we segmented and pulled the round off on the sirloin face, on the sirloin end here. We have two major parts of that. We have the bottom sirloin, which is the bottom of the cut, just generally how it's presented. And we have the top sirloin. And we'll actually talk about the entire face with respect to muscling, and we'll talk about each individual part. We also look at seam fat. That's an important thing. So as you take a look at here, we have seam fat and then also pelvic fats. Sometimes cod fat is another factor that would be down in this area of the cut. So we have fat, we look at both ends, we look at fat between, we look at fat across the back. Muscling, loin eye, the shape of the back, as well as the prominence of the sirloin, as well as the depth and meatiness of the sirloin face. Those are all factors. Okay, we're going to now practice. I have some video. And then we're going to take a quick break after this. So, but let's take a look at some video of some of these classes and see if you can tell me how you're going to place those classes. All right, so here's a beef cut, and I'm going to ask Lane here in a second to give us what her placing is going to be. Let's see if I can get that pulled up. There we go. Oh. Full screen. No, I want to go full screen. Let's try that again. There we go. All right, that may be, see if I can get that any bigger. So as we go here, I want you guys to tell me what you think the top carcass is. So as you approach a beef carcass class, you're going to be standing back for 2 minutes. And so you look at this class, and you're going to have to kind of notice some things. You won't be able to know the quality grade at least until the first 2 minutes are over. Then you go in and look at quality grade. You probably even from here can see that some have quite a bit of marbling and some don't. But I want to look at that ribeye size. You always want to stand back on classes. It's really a mistake to get in there close all the time. You want to get close to look at the ribeye size. But when you're looking at everything else, you should stand as far back as you can and look at the exhibits from different angles. So here's a beef carcass class. These carcasses will tell you the weight. The weight on these carcasses all weighs 625 pounds. And so that tells you there's a scale that the ribeye size for each one of these on an average should be 11.3. So all we have to do now is look at, is one bigger? If it's bigger, how much bigger? That can help us in yield grading. So we're starting to kind of evaluate how much fat is opposite the ribeye. So I always look here first when they say time in, and then my eye immediately goes up to the rail and I look and I make comparisons going from top to bottom. It's really important, otherwise your eye will be jumping all over the place, that you start and you do it in however your coach tells you, but in reality, it was some form or fashion, and I was just taught that we always start at the top and work our way down. And so I'm noticing something. I'm noticing over here, there's a lot of this fat right here, which we actually call udder fat, because I think it's we'll figure out, but I'm thinking this is a heifer. Okay, because I'm seeing the shape of the muscle just barely. I'm also looking at the leanness. How much blueness do I see over that round? And so we're going to make that comparison, and we'll look at and stand back. If they're positioned where I can see the brisket fat, I'm looking at that as well. Looking at fat over the plate, as I'm coming down, and then I go down and look at the brisket fat. Okay, and I might move around, see if I can see some fat over the chuck. Down in that area. So again, starting from bottom to top. Okay, now we take a look at these ribeyes. And so right now, don't put anything in the chat at this point. Okay, but you ought to start thinking, what are the yield grades and quality grades that I'm thinking? They all weigh the same. And I'm not going to be able to give you a kidney knob today, so I'm going to assume they all have the same amount of kidney fat. And so in this class, as you look at it, okay, so I'm going to start putting a quality grade on each one of these cuts. And then I'm going to start trying to come up with a yield grade and try to estimate what the grade is on each one of these cuts. Now, this is not an easy class. This is a class that you would typically see at a state contest. Okay, we'll have some easier ones that come up, but I think you can segment them into pretty much everything but a pair just by looking at quality grade and yield grade. So now we've looked at, you have a quality grade on each carcass, 1, 2, 3, 4. So just write down 1, 2, 3, 4 and put a quality grade on each one of these. Okay, now put a yield grade on each one of these. Okay, so we'll look at each one individually. Let's do that. Here's a 1. 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's the ribeye. Okay, so now we're going to go. Here's the carcasses on one angle. So now we can kind of see, again, going from top to bottom, looking at the round. Okay, looking over the loin, looking over the rib area, looking over the shoulder, looking at fat levels there. You also, as you look at classes, because quite often there might be what we call a dress defect. You'll notice over the loin, there's been fat torn away. So you have to kind of think past that and look at and kind of imagine as you look at it, look at the fat in other places that's a little off of that spot, just to kind of make that comparison. Okay, here another view of the shoulder, get a little better and look at the muscularity of the shoulder. Okay, now we have the brisket. So you can see, looking up again, starting top to bottom, this is what we call underneath. A lot of times we'll say we'll look underneath. And so now I'd start looking at the fat over the round, the inside of the round. Okay, then the fats, after you do that, coming down into the udder. These are all heifers, every one of them. You can see the kidney bean shaped muscle above the H bone. Here's the H bone. So so they call this udder fat. If it was a steer, they'd call it cod fat. And so I'm looking at, they all have quite a bit of fats as you look through that. Okay, so back to the ribeye. All right, so right now put your placing in the box and see what you think the placing is going to be. At least put the top carcass. Some of you guys don't want to put your neck on the line, but you need to at least tell me what the top carcass is. And we don't have time to spend 10 minutes in every class, but you should be able to pretty much say quality grade, yield grade, boom, this is what I think it's going to be. Okay, all right, let's talk through it. So as we look at the class, okay, I see a lot of people going with 4 on top, and then 3, okay, and then 2, and then 1, or 4 on top, and then 2, and then 3, and then 1 on the bottom. So why is 4 on top? So Lane, why don't you jump in here and let's talk through this. So why don't you unmute and we'll talk through this. So why did you put 4 on top?
Okay, I have Kaylee with me here too, but we decided to put 4 on top because we called it the highest quality, and it also just really combines muscling and trimness to the highest degree as well. So kind of has like everything going for it.
Yep, it does. Everything but udder fat. Hopefully you notice udder fat. That's what probably gave you a little pause, but it's trim everywhere else. And it's debatable, but I would call this prime. But if you call it top choice, it doesn't matter. So why did you put 1 on the bottom?
One was, although it was one of the trimmer ones as well, it was definitely the lowest quality, and we called it a small, so low choice.
And I would call it select. So that makes it even further down. So the only way is 2 and 3 are going to have to be excessively fat. So that's the question. Are they excessively fat? And what are their grades? What did you call the grades on 2 and 3?
We called them top choice.
Top choice. So they're top choice. So you have a prime, 2 top choice, and a select. And so the question is now how are we going to place 2 and 3? So again, 2 and 3, it depends. If you didn't call them both top choice, then you place 3 over 2 regardless. Okay, but if you called them both top choice, then how are you going to evaluate those, Lane?
We went 2 over 3 because we thought that 2 was trimmer in a lot of places, and whenever you had it with a full carcass, it looked like 2 is heavier muscled as well.
Yep. Okay, so now you kind of get the way that we think about it. Let's look at another class. All right, here's a class of ribs. And so you're standing back. You can kind of see them a little bit better as you look at them. The first thing you want to do is start thinking about, what do I have as I look at these classes? So here we've got these classes coming through. Kind of walking, you're standing back still, but you're looking at them from different angles. And so you don't want to just stand in one place. You kind of take a look at it, one end, come to the middle, kind of look at them. You know, they look actually a little different as you go from one place to the other. So it's really important to kind of move around the class and look at that class from different angles as you go through. Okay, coming down this side, and then you'll also, as you get in a little closer and take a look at them. And so now you want to start thinking about quality grade and at least preliminary yield grade. And know that if it's 0, it's a yield grade 2. If it has 4/10 of fat, it's a yield grade 3. If If it has 8/10 or more, then it starts out at a yield grade 4. Of course, ribeye area is something you consider that as well, but that's just a starting point. So you kind of think through that. Now we'll give you a close up. Here's a yield grade 1. So right now, excuse me, number 1, it's not a yield grade 1, but number 1. So look at this and write down the quality grade and the yield grade of each one of these. Okay, quality grade, and at least PYG, preliminary yield grade. I know it's relative with fat, but do your best as far as because it's video. Okay, next one. And here's the final one, number 4. So when you then after that, you want to go to the back, and you have to kind of remember something really important is that when you're back here, they're numbered opposites. So over here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. You turn around, number 4 now is back over here, left to right. So you have to keep that as numbers. Notice the numbers across the top we put in to help you. But in this, we want to look at, particularly those that are within the same quality category. Start thinking about, okay, which one's the trimmest? And if they're close on trimmest, you place them on muscling. If you use that basic premise, it's really helps you as far as coming in and looking at the final grade. We're looking at fat along the outside and seam fat. So you can see seam fat differences between these 4. Also fat along the outside. We're talking about the entire area. We call this the blade face. And again, you walk around, kind of look through that, go up close and look at them. That was 1. This is number 1. Here's 2. Again, we're not evaluating, although we will ask you questions about marbling here. Which one had the most marbling in the blade face, or which one had the coarsest texture, or finest textured in the blade face, or the firmest. Those are things we might ask you, but you're really, where you evaluate quality grade is the only place that they do that in the real world, and that is at the 12/13 through cross section, which is the other side. So you can see some differences in fatness on this side and trimness and muscling. Okay, so here we are. Take your final look. And again, I think I'm going to call on you guys to now put your placings in the text. So glad to see all these brave people. Way to go. All right, you have 10 more seconds. Put your placings down. What I'll do is I'll let you all see one more time. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. And here's, oh, jump over 4. There's 4. Okay, so I'm going to let Lane jump back in here. Let's go back to the overall picture of just the ribeyes. So Lane, let's jump in here and tell me what you think.
So when we were looking at it, we saw that 2 and 4, we kind of saw them as a pair, and 1 and 3 as a pair. We thought that 2 had a little bit more marbling and some trimness factors going for it. And so we placed it over 4. And then on the bottom, we went 1 over 3 because we thought 3 was a lot fatter and had a smaller ribeye compared to 1.
Yeah, way to go. So she really kind of in a nutshell, you step back, you have 2 that are top choice, and number 2 and number 4 are top choice. Number 1 and number 3 are low choice. Okay, so you've got those. So now I have 2 top choice. So in my category, I ask myself the question, between 2 and 4, which is trimmer? And you can see as you look, particularly over the face, it's trimmer. Okay, 2 is, and also has a larger ribeye. And then if I look back over, see all that blueness back here? That's a pretty good indication. When I do go to the other side, you can see that that carries, if I can get to the picture of all 4 of them. There we go. So as you look at that, you can say, wow, that is really trim over that side, that face. Okay, so now we go back and look at those pictures of the overall group. Okay, so we're going to go with 2 over 4. So what about 4 over? Why do we place 4 over 1? Because it's top choice and the other one's low choice. Okay, even if we did do that, it would be closer, a close pair because of some differences in fatness, because they both be choice. But top choice places over low choice. Now my 2 low choice, I look at it, which one's trimmer? Well, number 1 is trimmer. Okay, and if you look at muscling, I think it also has a larger ribeye. Put those factors together, that makes it a better yield grade, and so 1 places over 3. That's how that works. All right, we're going to do one more class because I've got to get you through. We're probably, if you need to take a break, I'm going to let you guys take your break on your own because I don't think we're going to have time. I got to get at 10:30. I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Griffin. Okay, let's see. Which one should I do? Short loins. Yeah, let's do these short loins. Yep. Okay, so here is a class of short loins. If you take a look at the short loins, again, you know, this is a quality class because we have the 12th rib section. We'll get a close-up of each ribeye here in a minute, but you're standing back, you're looking at it. You can kind of see some, well, one of these has, even from back here, looks like it has quite a bit of marbling, and one looks pretty fat and doesn't look like it has much marbling. So I'm kind of starting to gravitate. And then I look beyond the ribeye. I look back to give me a kind of an estimate of some fatness differences in those. So as I look at that class, you know, I'm going to kind of just stand back, and you can walk around to the other side and look at the class as well. If you take a look at, let's see. Okay, now we're going to get in close to the ribeyes. Okay, so this is number 1. So start thinking, write down 1, 2, 3, 4, and put down a quality grade and yield grade on each one of these. Okay, and so you're thinking, again, you know, just even if you did the PYG, that's going to get you in the ballpark for a yield grade. Okay, so this is 1. Oops, so I'll skip over. Here's 2. So here's 3. Here's 4. Okay, so now let's look at the other side. If you take a look at the other side, remember we're backwards. So this is 4, here's 3, here's 2, and here's 1. So, and remember, tenderloin's really important on this side. You also look at total meatiness. You're looking at fat. You're looking at kidney fat or channel fat that you look down here in this corner. Okay. And also you can look fat down the back side. So if you're looking at this side, this is number 1, 2. Also, this is along the back of the animal. Okay, now we're back to the fronts. So now you're looking at all 4. All right, so now put your placings in the corner. Isn't it easy to do it now when there's not the pressure of a contest? All right, now you guys are brave. Way to keep it going. Okay, Lane, you're up. I guess who are you working with there?
This is Kaylee Griner.
All right, Kaylee. Yeah, you're up. Okay.
She was also on the meat judging team with us in 2019. And she'll be the coach here at A&M next year too. So we got us a good helper. But when we approached the class, we definitely looked at the quality, and we thought that 4 and 3 definitely had more marbling. We called 4 a prime, and so we placed it over 3, and we called 3 a top choice, and then from there we went 2 over 1 because 2 is significantly trimmer compared to 1.
Yeah, you see how it just kind of fits. So you quality grade them first, and 1 and 2 are low choice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 3 is top choice, and 4, I called it prime. But even if you call it top choice, when you look at the other factors, I think it still goes over 3 because there are some trimness here and there, trimness, but there's some muscling advantages as well. So, but mostly because it's prime, it's going to go over 3. So, and why did we put 3 over the others? Because it's a top choice, and the other ones are low choice. And there is one that's extremely fat, and that is number 1. Number 1 would be almost a yield grade 5, yield grade 4. I believe when I measured it, it had an inch of fat opposite the ribeye. Number 2 had like I think 6 or 7 tenths. Number 3 had somewhere around 5 to 6 tenths, and number 4 had about 5 tenths as well, 5 to 6 tenths. So again, you take a look at that trimmer and the fattest one. Also, if you kind of from back here, it looks select. When you get in there, it looks low choice. And so with all of that, it's a fairly easy placing to put that one on the bottom. Number 2 just logically fits in third, and then you have something to work with. And once you determine 4 is a prime, it goes to the top.